Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to James Glancy, a former Royal Marine Commando turned TV presenter and member of the European Parliament. Over at BREW we discovered that we crossed paths 12 years ago in Afghanistan. We talk about his adventures on the Discovery Channel Shark Week out in the Pacific Ocean, and he gives advice to anyone planning a career in TV. Do you fancy a brew? What brew are you drinking? Have you got a brew or are you on a cold one?
Yeah, it's Tuesday, so I'm on water. By the way, if I look like I've got a sheen on my head, I have. I am still sweating. I went for a run an hour ago, 34 degrees. It's only 5k, but it really does take it out of you. I always run when it's hot because it's just good to test yourself. They say don't do that. It's absolute nonsense. That's when you have the best sweat out. That's when you know when you're in shape.
So James, welcome to Fancy a Brew podcast. Just give us a bit of an introduction to who you are and what the script is, and then we'll see how it flows from there.
Yeah, Andy, thanks for having me on. Always good to talk to someone from the diving community. And actually, I've just come back from a little trip down in Plymouth, free diving with blue sharks, which we can get on to later. But my background is I served in the military for just over 10 years in the Royal Marines, and I trained as a diver whilst in the military. But prior to that, I've been diving all my life. I started at 14 years old. Did my first PADI course, and it was sort of that sort of time that inspired me to get into end up joining the military, but also set my passion straight for wildlife. So I now work in conservation. I work for Charity Veterans for Wildlife, and I also do TV presenting and camera work, mainly wildlife and quite often underwater. So I've hosted some shows on Shark Week. I meant to have a show on this week's Shark Week as we speak. It's Shark Week in America, but that got postponed due to COVID-19. But I'll be out my way in the next couple of months going to do my next shark documentary. And then I've got another that one that was postponed. That's coming up. I'm going to Japan. So I'm in and around the wildlife presenting and filming world and conservation.
Okay, well that's interesting. Why did you choose then to do a history degree?
I'm naturally quite strong in the arts. I did geography and biology, but I've always had an interest in history. I've always had an interest in international relations. Yeah. And that's the thing that came most naturally at school. But in the background, I've always been an outdoor person. I've always been on the sports field, underwater, skydiving, out and about. But I chose an arts degree, and then went into the military. And when I got into that military system, that's where they just give you even more skills to go do the stuff that you enjoy.
My first encounter with the Royal Marines was in 2008 when I went on Herrick 8, and I was out with a reconnaissance unit, the Queen's Royal Lancers, and we were attached to the Royal Marines Army Support Company. And when they started talking about the galley and a wet and that, it was just all foreign language to me. I was just like, what on earth are you guys on about? And then obviously you get to sort of pick up some of that lingo like we do as soon as you join the military.
There's a huge number of words. I think there is a book that tries to get all Jack speak, bootneck speak into context, and there's over 700 words, which is almost the same as a small language. But I was actually in Armour Support Company.
Were you?
Well, on Armour Support Group as it was then. Yeah, I did a 8-month tour of Afghanistan as a Viking Troop commander, right in the peak of the sort of the scrap and the IED season as it began in 2007 and 8.
So we probably just took over from you then, because we went out in the April to May of 2008, and then we stayed out till November. So we did.
Well, yeah, and I was there. I was there till June 2008. The Queen's Royal Lancers took over.
Skull and Crossbones. Yeah, that was us.
Oh, well, that's it. Well, yeah. Well, I was one of the. So I was up at Inkerman.
Yeah, I was at Fort Inkerman, Jen.
Did you? So you would have been with B Company from 2 Para. Yeah, well, that's incredible, really. Yeah. Well, that was
small world.
That was. We had a very busy tour, and we lost. I mean, on the last day of the tour, we had 3 vehicles lost. Because someone died, or says someone died. I mean, we lost people. We lost a lot of people over the course of the tour. But yeah, it was hectic. And I did that was an 8-month straight. That was an 8-monther I did.
I often look back and think I wish I'd have documented a bit more. I even kept a journal, which unfortunately my ex-wife decided to lose somewhere. So I kind of regretful in many ways that I didn't document that in a better way, just for me and my children, you know, to look back on, because it was interesting. So what's your surfacing tool? How long have you been out the water now? As in diving though.
Well, I mean, I was on the water on Thursday, Friday down in Plymouth, and we went out into the English Channel free diving, which is amazing because the water visibility is far better than South Africa, where people go to dive or swim with blue, or dive or swim or snorkel or free dive with blue sharks. You just don't need to do that. The water temperature is warmer than South Africa. The visibility was much better, and we had the same number of sharks. I mean, we had about 7, and this is still early in the season. They are June till October, but you know, the largest sort of concentration of the numbers you're going to get around September.
Yeah.
Prior to that, diving, I don't even think I've dived this year. Maybe a cold water dive. I think I've been doing some promo stuff, some shoots. So we're just getting the rig on in rivers actually about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I have not been. I'm not. To be honest, I used to do what I call civvy bubble making diving a lot for pleasure.
Yeah.
And now it's work. And because the military turned it into work as well, I always like to dive with a purpose. So I'm either going to do something scientific or I'm going to film. I need to get some sort of access. If I'm on holiday, I will jump in the water just to keep ticking over. But I kind of recreational diving, unless it's something really special that I want to go and see, like I want to go diving or swimming, at least free diving with orcas, or there's certain species that I want to see, like the humpback whales. I saw humpback whales last year, like sperm whales or something very particular.
Yeah. No,
I'm unlikely to book a liverboard and go and do that because I'd rather get paid to go and do that for work.
All right. No doubt we'll get onto that in a bit. So you said you started diving at 14. What got you into diving then at such a young age?
I was just a pretty crazy active kid. I did almost every sport, from cross country to football, cricket, rugby. I was in the Scouts. I was just constantly doing stuff, and very difficult for my parents to handle somebody with just such an active mind and body. And I think they took us on holiday, and we'd never been anywhere but camping or to France, or just what you do when kids are young. But they took us to Florida, and I just did not enjoy the beach. I wasn't particularly overwhelmed by any of the Disney type of stuff. So they decided the hotel was offering scuba diving, and it was 14 as a cut-off. I was 13, but I was 14. We were there in August, and so they let me do my theory. They let me do my theory at age 13. On my 14th birthday, I did my first dive. Wow. And that, I absolutely loved it. I was a really strong swimmer as a kid. I did it with my dad. He'd never dived before. And I remember the sort of older sort of people in the boat doing their paddy course. And it was quite wavy, it's quite choppy. And they sort of said to my dad and me, you sure he wants to get in? He's quite young. And I just turned around and said, well, I could outswim any of these people. I could swim back to land. I bet they couldn't. I was quite cheeky. In the water in those first few dives, apart from being annihilated surrounded by these moon jellyfish, which I remember like it was yesterday, getting stung. When we went subsurface onto this wreck, a shallow wreck which you couldn't dive through, just to look at it, we saw sharks, and kind of changed my perception on everything about the underwater world. So yeah, I was very lucky that my parents, pulling their hair out, trying to entertain me, just put me on courses or anything sporty or outdoorsy, just to basically shut me up. And I think keeping me underwater has certainly entertained me for many years.
I think we probably would have been quite similar kids. I was always into everything, climbing trees, playing rugby for the school team, cricket for the local team, different age groups and that. But my mum and dad probably just couldn't support me wanting to do everything I wanted to do. So that's probably why, in many respects, I mean, it's flipping expensive diving, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I remember the course was about $330.
Yeah.
That's just quite a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
But my mum just spent her entire life taking us to and just sporty stuff, because we were just so energetic. My brother and sister, it was just managing us, just doing sporty stuff. And I've had to keep that up as I got older. Doing stuff because I like to be active. I've always got 2 or 3 things going on. But it does make me think, the importance of when we talk about education for kids, it's not just about classroom-based stuff. Education begins, outdoors. It begins. Education's on the sports field. It's whether it's out making camps in the woods. It's all formative experiences that teaches you to sort of manage yourself, self-discipline, leadership skills, teamwork skills, and to challenge yourself, to fail, to succeed. Yeah, it's all critical stuff.
Absolutely.
We at school or education for children, part of it should be offering as many different opportunities to test themselves and to work out what they like. But the other thing I think is great to cadets, and I'm sure in the current political climate, people will find that controversial, putting kids in uniform, but it's one of the best experiences any kid can have. Learning, get back into those skills of teamwork, leadership, self-confidence, and discipline. I'd like to see that expanded. The opportunity, access to cadets is it benefits so many kids.
One of the girls that I interviewed quite early on in making this podcast, Grace, her name was, and she's just been announced as like an ambassador for girls at Scuba. But she, as in her very early teens, I think she's 17 now, she's at college, and in her very early teens, she started going through the army cadets, and looks back on it, it was always dreading going away for the weekend because the weather was going to be gash, and you've got to wear this uniform and you're going to get shouted at. But actually, she'd come back on a Sunday night buzzing, going, I don't want to come home. I've had the greatest time because I've been doing things that kids sort of thrive on, that structure and routine, don't they? And if nothing else, she learned how to iron her clothes. She was really, big on that when I interviewed her. She really enjoyed that, and I did try with my eldest, and she absolutely hated it. And I don't know.
The other thing it does is it's not just making tents or camps and being on parade and doing all that sort of stuff, or even shooting. I mean, I know the sort of air training corps, they teach kids to fly in gliders, and they do trips. They're teaching kids to rock climb. There is diving, so many things like that. Get back to the subject of diving. It is there is a sort of certain barrier to entrance. One, generally being near water, if you live up in an urban area, you're really unlikely to come into contact with a dive centre. 2 is obviously the cost. It is prohibitively expensive, not necessarily to get your license, but actually to do the activity in places that are nice to do it. And there aren't that. Let's be honest, it's not ideal conditions diving around the UK. There's some great dives if you're really into it. Whether it's wreck dives or wildlife, kelp forests. There is all of that, but in the UK, it's not necessarily that accessible. And of course, on top of sort of saying you're going to go overseas and do go to some of these places that are really pleasant to dive, the cost of the kit, it is a very much a fairly niche adventure sport. What do you think?
A conversation that I'd had previous sparked this, that most of the people that are on the television or that are in the limelight to do with diving are middle-aged men. Well, that's kind of us. Most people are around our age, I suggest, at the forefront of the sport, and I'd suggest that perhaps that's probably because we've hit a point in our life where we've got a little bit of free cash, a bit of free time. Like my kids obviously have sort of flown the nest now. One's at university, one's working full-time, one's just finished high school. No interest in getting their hair wet, the makeup getting, the fake tan getting washed off. So perhaps that's why there's not a lot of young girls diving. And then maybe because of where we live in the country, certainly where I live, it's a predominantly white area. So that might be why we don't see a lot of people of colour diving where I dive. So
I mean, but it's not a big thing in the UK because of generally because of the climate.
well, absolutely, yeah.
And I think that would change. That's different in another country.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know a lot of young people that are into diving, but it also comes down to cost, access. Yeah, I know a lot of wildlife people. A huge number of young people coming through the system. I go to these wildlife movie or film festivals, and it's an amazing number of people from all sorts of backgrounds that are really keen. But yeah, I mean, nothing's going to get over the fact that unless you're doing something like free diving, the good name for it really isn't, because it's not just you're free of kit, but it is generally free to do if you do from shore free diving. It is prohibitively expensive, and another sport I'm passionate about and I love doing, and I don't do enough of it, is skydiving. But that is incredibly expensive to sort of do, to get qualified in, because of the time commitment, and then the kit is super niche and expensive, or you're hiring it, and you're paying for aeroplane time. But we are talking about sports, adventure sports, which are sort of on the fringe margin. It's way more accessible to go kayaking or climbing than it is to do the sport, any sort of subsurface water sports that we're talking about.
Absolutely. My wife, for our first anniversary, so last year, she bought me the RAPS course, the rammer parachute system, is it called, RAPS, instead of Advanced Freefall AFF.
Yeah.
So I did that because I never wanted to sort of be on somebody's back as such, do a tandem. If I was going to jump out of a plane, I was doing it under my own steam. And I wanted to continue it, but when I started looking at the money, not so much the risk versus reward, but how long it would take and how often I would do it, I just thought, you know what? I'd love to. I've not done a proper free fall yet. Obviously, it was all static line. I'd love to do the proper free fall, but it's just such a drawn out process and expensive along the way.
The time commitment, skydiving. You spend so much time waiting around for the right weather conditions or loading on an aircraft. That is way more niche.
Did you learn that through the army? For the military?
Yeah, I did a jumps course, basic parachute course on rounds at Bryce Norton, and I did my squares, and then I did my AFF as well. And now I've got my B license. So yeah, I mean, I'm jumping this year, but this year has been completely different with coronavirus. All the sports, I really haven't done anything that I thought I'd be doing.
You seem to do a lot of sports that maintain, your high level of fitness, lots of sort of training and time and effort put in. So I heard you used to be a bit of a boxer back in your day.
Yeah.
Because it's a phenomenally disciplined sport, that, isn't it? So do you think that set you up for when you joined the Royal Marines, for the discipline?
Yeah, because uni is easy just to go off the rails, but this is what I mean. I've always needed sort of a challenge or a focus to have a lot going on, and I played rugby, and then I sort of quit rugby to focus on the boxing. Boxing's one of those sports like cricket. You don't take it up at 17, 18. You should be taken up at 8, 9 years old. That's how you become a natural. Or if you're Tyson Fury at 6 months old, which is why no one can lay a finger on him, because he knows it's coming before the opposition's even put the punch out. It's an instinctive sport, but fitness and strength does of course part of it. So I took to it later in life, but it was the routine. It's so regimented in terms of being up early and getting fit, doing the right weight routines, and then of course sparring and bag work. And then I was obviously leading the club, because the whole point of being in a Blues team at Oxford or Cambridge is to fight against Oxford team against Cambridge. I was probably training 7 to 9 times a week, which is quite unusual for somebody at university. So that helps with going and stepping off that straight into university. But I was also sponsored through uni by the Marines. That was a major help. Financially, I wouldn't have been able to afford, or my parents wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise. But it was a good, it's all that sort of being part of the military and boxing was, part of the sort of same package. But I loved it, and I still do. I still think it's one of the best sports for self-discipline. But it's also not a sport you can casually take part in like golf or cricket. you know, if you're going to go have a bout, you know, amateur or professional, you have to dedicate yourself to it probably more than any other sport, because the bottom line is the opposition is trying to punch you in the face and knock you out. But at least at golf, you can sort of chill a bit if you don't win. You know, hopefully no one's going to wrap a golf club around your head. But boxing is completely different. That it's a dedicated sport. I tell you what, it does test you in though. It's just your. It's one of the most frightening experiences in your life. It's stepping in the boxing ring in front of a crowd of any sort. You know, just you. There's nowhere to hide, and it's a great sport because you're put at the similar weight to someone else. That's another thing I'd like to see in schools, come back to schools, is boxing. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people against it. But again, self-discipline is brilliant.
Absolutely. But it's not for me. My nose is broken, bent and big enough as it is, so I don't need someone else pummeling it for me. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I had one bout when I was in the Royal Marines. I think the Naval Champions or so, and I got put against this ringer. It was just, he'd done 35 amateur bouts and about 6 or 7 senior bouts. So we were similar on senior bouts, but I couldn't touch him. He'd been doing it from a young age. Definitely one of those sports that, you know, if you want to get good at it, you've got to be doing it from sort of a young age.
Right, interesting stuff. When you left the military, did you then go straight into politics, or?
No, and I've not been involved at all. No, I started a risk management firm. Business, and I've been doing that and conservation and TV stuff over the last 6.5 years. But last year I got so pissed off with the Brexit process, I got asked if I wanted to run as an MEP for a new party, and because I backed Brexit, and I said, you know, I was so upset with the way the whole situation had been handled since the referendum. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a go, and we didn't have long to make the decision. And I didn't actually think there'd be a Euro elections. And amazingly, we got elected, and so we're MEPs for 4 months, which is the most extraordinary period of time, and it put me off forever being involved with politics.
Really,
it's such a dark world. You know, all the parties. It's sort of dampened my sort of view on the leadership of all parties, Conservative, Liberal Democrats, Labour, because there are some really good people, but the system never really allows good people to stay true to their morals. So for me, I consider it a pretty bad experience. I didn't enjoy it, and I also recognise how divisive Brexit is, and many issues today everything seems to be so toxic and divisive.
It does, doesn't it?
And I don't want to be involved in that. I far more enjoy building something more positive, which is you know, spreading a good conservation message.
Let's get on to that then. I really did enjoy watching your Shark Week work, whether it would be your sort of parachute free fall jump into the sea and then the swim, or where you set fire to that boat and then just mooched around a boy for 2 days. I don't want to spoil the fun, but I'm going to ask the question, because if I didn't ask it, I'd probably not forgive myself. How, not stage managed, that's the wrong word, but how safe was that for you to do? You know, because obviously risk assessments and all the rest of it would come into play.
Well, there's 2 shows there. So there's Shark Week 1 and 2 on Discovery Channel on Shark Week. The idea of it, I pitched it as a conservation show, which is when the USS Indianapolis sank in 1945. That was the vessel, the American naval vessel carrying the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and brought an end to the war. That vessel sank. It was hit by a Japanese torpedo boat, and many of the sailors perished as a result of the elements, mainly the elements, but some got eaten by sharks. And that vessel, the GPS coordinates got found by Paul Allen, the Microsoft founder. So my idea was, well, let's kind of recreate what would happen to sailors in the Pacific now that we know that GPS location. Because what I want to show is that as a result of illegal and unregulated fishing, the sharks responsible, which are oceanic whitetips, are not there anymore in any density. You know, their numbers have declined between 90 and 99%.
Wow. In
the last 25, 30 years, but probably more than that since 1945. But if you jumped in the water back then, it would have been very sharky. It would have been a different experience. So I pitched this idea, which is, you know, I'll go in the water and we want to see what sharks are there, and we want to couch this as a conservation environmental story. And that sort of the noise of conservation got very quickly lost, as it quite often does on television. And they said, well, we're really interested to do this experiment to see how sharks react to shipwreck survivors. I was kind of on board by that point, and we ended up doing this experiment in the Bahamas. So this boat gets destroyed, and Paul de Gelder and I are in the water for 48 hours. With oceanic white-tips, about 12 at one point. We were in the water. Very simple. We were in, the biggest thing they're worried about is the lightning storm, would you believe? They got us out to sit on the side of the boat during a lightning storm, just in case there was a lightning strike near us. But so at night time and daytime, we had two scenarios. Nighttime was floating about, cameramen in the water, they were sort of rotating every 2 hours. And the sharks just potter around you. If they come close, you kind of push them away because you can see them and they know you can see them. And almost every species of shark is like that. If they know you're confident you can see them, they're just not particularly interested. And if they do come up close, you can push them away and they get the message. Nighttime's very different. You can't see them. And we, rather than having a cage, which are just kind of pointless, we created this net system, sort of a pen. So it had aluminium frame, but around it were genuinely cricket nets, what we use for cricket. Which, you can't break through. A human can break through them. They're strong. But has that feeling of being way closer to sharks. So they did come and sort of bump into it. Yeah. So that was the control measure at night. And the other one was, the debate before it was, well, would you have, are you allowed masks or not? Because a survivor of a shipwreck is unlikely to have a mask. We're like, well, yeah, but if we don't have masks, it's going to be bloody dangerous. So obviously, we're going to have a mask. And that's the only thing that stops them coming too close. And so this ended up in being this ultimate adventure survival experiment. But I would say, a hand on heart, I can say that, it's not, in most waters, if you go down, it's not sharks that are going to get you, particularly now they've been decimated by fishing. It's just being in the water is absolutely horrendous. For more than 5 or 6 hours, you're freezing, you get dehydrated, exhaustion, you start getting cramps. That's what's going to take people. That's what takes almost all survivors. But it was a crazy experiment. There were control measures, but they really wanted to keep it as realistic as possible. Yeah,
I remember watching that film actually, where they were getting so sort of hallucinogenic sort of thing towards the end. They were diving down and going, oh, it's less salty the deeper you go, and then you'd just be swimming, as in the actual movie of that Indianapolis sinking. And
were they? Yeah. I mean, I need to watch that again. It is vivid. And I think it was oceanic white-tips, probably some tigers, and obviously blue sharks. But what they say, if you read the reports, is that it was mainly the carcasses. I mean, I imagine how able-bodied people were taken, mainly carcasses. But what the other reason we use the nets at night is if you saw their lifeboats, or not lifeboats, were they sort of, I guess, like sort of flotation devices. They had this sort of flotation bit around the edge and then net in the middle.
Okay.
And if you remember the movie, sometimes the sharks were coming up and having a little exploratory bite. They can't really do that. But if you've got bits dangling out, there might be some nibbles.
Yeah. That's I'm pretty jealous, to be fair, because I'd much sooner be doing that than killing, I don't know, wasps and stuff at people's houses. It sounds pretty adventurous. So how did you get into the sort of TV stuff? Was that always a plan, or?
My dad's a cameraman and he's still going. He's been going about 45 years in the industry. He's 72 now. So I've been around the media industry from all my life, and I didn't realise how second nature it was to me. I always thought I was going to make documentaries, but I never knew the route into it. I got asked to be on SAS Who Dares Wins, the very, very popular Channel 4 format, and I said no to that. And season 1 and season 2, I sort of gave it a countenance. I thought, the profile it gives you, because I very quickly realised I wanted to do environmental wildlife type shows, and I hadn't realised how difficult it was to get into television. I hadn't appreciated it at all, and it is harder than almost anything I've done, because the barrier to entry is so difficult. So many people, it's such a glamour industry. People want to be in it just to be on TV. I thought if you're passionate about something, knowledgeable, learning my trade, and it's still a grind. So when you get the opportunity to have a leg up, even if it is reality, and to have such a big profile, but ultimately it just sort of compromised my values, and I decided against doing it. But what it did do is show me how the process worked. It gave me an insight to the types of production companies that do reality. Some do, and they call that specialist factual, but it really is more sort of a reality game show. But I suddenly realised that what I want to do is in a specialist factual realm. And from that point in, I worked. It just gave me an insight of how production companies work, who does the development, who does the pitching. So what I did was think, well, what do I watch on TV? I pretty much watch National Geographic, sometimes Discovery, BBC Two, PBS Nature. I watch all those types of shows quite often. It's all wildlife and quite often underwater or sharks. So I just paused the credits on almost every single show that I liked, wrote down the name of the executives in the production company, and then I just carpet bombed them with emails and Twitter messages and saying, I want to talk, I've got ideas, I want to talk. And I've probably done this about more than 100 times to different people, and being ignored 50% of the time, and then sort of sometimes people reply and give you non-answers and sort of tell you why it's not a good idea, then you steal that idea or just fob you off. But I kept sort of persevered until somebody has developed an idea with me for Shark Week, which was the idea we just discussed, the experimental idea, and it got commissioned. And once you get that break, you only need one break to you need the door open once, and then you bam, put your foot in it. Don't let that door shut. And that's what I'm still in the process now. The door's open, and I'm doing stuff, developing stuff. But it was just, I've done it sort of grafting the hardware. And even though my dad's a cameraman, he's sort of blue collar staff. He doesn't have the access to people, but what he has done is I understand the industry for the language, how it operates. So I've kind of put two and two together, and it's sort of been 3 years of hard graft.
Yeah. To get into it. I was going to say, so do you find you need to sort of be developing them ideas and pitching them to the commissioners, or are people approaching you in equal amounts with work?
Oh, I wish people were approaching me. I'll tell you what,
don't
mate.
we all?
It's like any business. You wish essentially it's like clients approaching you saying, we want you to do, and it's like a business. When you start out, clients aren't saying, can you make my pizza, or can you make my house, or whatever the business may be. You have to go out there and make a name and prove that you either serve good food or you're an established trader. And you've got to create a show where you've got to be relevant doing stuff. And I'm sort of almost like year 3, year 4 into a business cycle. I've just got, I've done some stuff. I'm doing talks, and people are seeing that I'm passionate, I'm credible, I've been learning, I've been training as a cameraman. But certainly no one's kicking down my door or my emails and saying, we're desperate to give you a serious commission on BBC.
No.
Quite the opposite. So the way it works is, I speak to scientists, I read a lot, and I'm always thinking of, what is an angle on this that I'm relevant to through my military experience, or, what I'm passionate about. And I've got a little folder of stuff, and I've narrowed down the production companies to 3 or 4 I work with in the UK and US, and we're pitching ideas, I've got a good relationship with them. And it's still hard. I don't think it's ever easy until you're absolutely established.
So Planet SOS with the mail, has that been running quite a while?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So Daily Mail Group is it's different. You've got your traditional paper, which is generally conservative, writer-centre thinking. We've got a very traditional, older readership. And you've got the Mail Online, very celebrity orientated, quick news, content, but that's that very much celebrity orientated. The Mail Plus is a separate editorial, which kind of trying to fuse a bit of everything and make content, bring stories to life. So they've got all sorts of really interesting shows. I met somebody that does a political show about 9 months ago, and said to them, you've got a political show, you've got a royal show. Are you doing anything in the environment or wildlife? Because this is what all the kids are talking about. And, looking at politics, the last election, it was in the sort of top three priorities. And, you know, it's certainly right up there in people's priorities with climate change, wildfires, you know, pollution, and of course, coronavirus pandemic caused by zoonotic diseases and our treatment of wildlife. So when I pitched this idea, I got to meet the editor, and he said, "Yeah, let's do something. My kids are badgering me about it. I'd be really interested to hear what you could do." So I just came up with some ideas, and they gave me my own show called Planet SOS.
Wow!
But they gave me that show, and then we went into bloody lockdown.
Jeez.
So what was meant to be sort of quite a good budget with a lot of sort of support, I've ended up having to produce it from home with my own camera, getting in touch with people, going into local woods to do piece to cameras. And but over the last course of lockdown, I've made 18 Planet SOS shows and two history ones. Do you know what? It's the reception from people has been good. People across the political spectrum, from Caroline Lucas to Chris Packham. You know, I've had Lords, I've had all sorts of people, I've had MPs in India. But what it's really taught me is how to do it, how to write a script, how to produce, how to be, you know, organise the whole piece. All this experience that I would never have got. It's been absolutely fantastic. So, and I've learned a lot. You know, sometimes I'm talking to a lot of professors. It's like my own personal tutorial on climate change. So I've gained a lot out of it, and I hope some of the shows I deliver, people find at least watchable, if not interesting.
So in that respect, it's corrupt. Well, this whole sort of lockdown since March, it's been more positive in that respect for you, would you say?
Yeah, it has. I mean, my granddad died at the beginning, and they say he died of coronavirus, but he didn't. He had a fall.
I know a few people that's just been signed off for that, and it's like he didn't do that. That didn't happen.
That's a hard start, you know. I've taken a huge pay cut. My documentary work's been kicked to the future. There's been nothing going on, but so I kind of made the most of it. But you know, what do you think? There's different types of people. So, you know, some people are in a unfortunate position where there's no way they can innovate because of their personal circumstance.
Yeah.
But those of us that do have a bit more flexibility, you know, I don't have kids. You know, I had coronavirus very early on. So once I got over it, you know, I kind of made my own luck. You know, what do you think? Do you think, you know, have you seen people having different experiences, some making the most of it and others struggling?
I was in a similar sort of position where I had loads of plans for this year to do with diving. I had an expedition out to Croatia. We're supposed to go into Scotland, doing a basking shark research trip with Basking Shark Scotland in September. I had a good camera, I've got a decent office, you know, I've got the setup to make the most of that lockdown when I wasn't working. Whereas there's a lady across the road, she's a couple of young kids, she's on her own, the garden's slightly overgrown, and the kids couldn't go to the park, the garden she can't play in, and I think, how much of a miserable existence must she have had during that period when I was thriving? I even bought, James, a paddling pool in my back garden, 3 foot tall, 10 foot across. I made my own little reef in there, got my macro lens out, and started practicing in there. And I got some phenomenal practice. So for me, it was quite an enjoyable sort of time. You know, I spent more time with my wife, but I developed a big friendship base through doing this. You know, I've got a lot more contacts now, people that I can liaise with if we're going diving here, there and everywhere. And so I've learned quite a lot of you, if I may have interest in wanting to get into television. You've certainly told me to start looking through the credits at the end of EastEnders or whatever.
Yeah, I know. Poor producers get hammered, because I said this to you guys. But I think there's any if you want to get an a business industry, you just got to keep knocking on the doors, keep meeting people, you know, it's all verging on harassment. A couple of things you mentioned there. Scotland, basking sharks, I'm up for that if there's a spot, and also we could do a Planet SOS about it. Secondly, I do think it kind of, you know, very sadly exposes the haves and have-nots, and the poverty divide across the world, particularly, you know, in the UK. If you've got a spare room that you can have an office, and you've got a garden, and you've been furloughed, you probably had quite a nice time. You know, for me, I haven't spent this much time in the UK in 15 years or so. So it's been important for me to sort of catch up with friends, family, even albeit over the phone and, you know, social media or whatever, or sort of Zoom event. And even now lockdown's broken, meet people in the pub, and I've caught up with more people because I'm not just rushing around. I have to acknowledge I am very lucky to have the space to make Planet SOS at home. I have a little garden, and I've tended that. I've got tomatoes out there, and I've done the grass and all sorts of things. You know, I can walk to a local park, and some of us have just had that opportunity, I say, to thrive, but to make the most of it. So, you know, I think there's going to be some major fallouts of this, politically, socially, as people start to realise that, you know, things are going to change. And I think there will be positive things for the environment, potentially positive things for the way we work. But there's a huge amount of, you know, negative or difficult circumstances that people will be faced with as a result of this. And it is definitely not over yet.
Mm. I've got a friend who works he's an ear, nose and throat consultant surgeon. So he's been drafted into ICU every week or so during the sort of main spike of it. And he was telling me all sorts of tales that obviously I wouldn't sort of broadcast on here, but you know, it sounds horrific. But then it's just all died a death now as such locally. Although we're in the northwest, we're in a bit of a sort of lockdown over the last couple of weeks, and the next week or so, hopefully it'll subside quite quickly. But he's fully expecting this next spike to be even worse. And I'm going in shops, obviously, for the job that I do. I have to go in like to B&Q and builders merchant type places, and the amount of people just cutting around with no mask on.
Everything seems to be divisive at the moment. I mean, people's now missing Brexit, aren't they? It makes it look like bloody fun. What we're all arguing about. But this, you know, coronavirus, you know, there's all these other issues, the social societal issues. But you know, I tend to think that we need to crack on. And we need to learn to live with it. I think, yeah, fine, wear masks. If the science says that, I'm not a scientist to say it's not or it is. I don't think shutting service industry, the pubs or anything like that will have, we should do that regardless if there's a second wave. And the reason I think that is because 2 years ago, my sister and mum were watching a TV show about male prostate cancer, and then made my dad next day just get checked out. And he was found to have very aggressive prostate cancer, and they caught it in time.
Wow.
Cut it out before it went into the bone marrow or whatever. Would apparently spread around the body, and he'd be gone. It'd be brown bread. There are people on death row that don't know it, or are just finding out because of cancelled appointments. You know, and also we lost someone from my old school who's committed suicide as a result of business crashing.
Jeez. And
so, you know, you've got to look at this. Do we completely write off the future generations by trashing the economy completely? And do we condemn people who can't get appointments? I think that balance is the way we need to deal with the next phase. And be, obviously, understand this is a very serious virus. It really can take even fit people out. But generally, it's not fit people or that will suffer. But I think balance is the way this needs to be resolved, because we can't just go back into continuous lockdowns. No. Because, you know, a COVID is like, you know, the COVID 1, COVID 2, or these early COVIDs, they're like common colds or flus. They keep coming back. You know, we can't forever hide. So we're just going to have to learn. My view is we are going to have to learn to live with it.
Well, let's get back onto the track of talking about scuba diving then. I'm more sort of how I came across you on Twitter a couple of weeks ago was your Veterans for Wildlife work.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot going on. Veterans for Wildlife founded about 4 or 5 years ago, and it is to deal with the illegal wildlife trade. People from the military, police, paramedics, anybody that's been in a service, one of the services, emergency services, those skill sets are applicable to working in the illegal wildlife trade. And that, you know, that could be as simple as sort of helping support intelligence, prosecution of wildlife networks that are in the logistics or the financing chain of trafficking animals, trafficking live animals or ivory or rhino horn, because it's a huge trade. It's worth more than 20 billion a year annually. And so those skill sets are relevant to sporting industry. But of course, the other side is the front line side, which is where the rangers work, anti-poaching rangers, and their work is often very, very dangerous, if not deadly. And we saw this year 14 rangers died in Virunga National Park. And those people are often very under-resourced. There's no codified training across the world for what a ranger training should be. And you know, they're exposed to significant challenges mentally, physically on the front line of conservation, and that we recognise that veterans can support in the capacity build, improving their capacity. improving their skill sets, so that if they do come into a contact with a poacher, their survival rate will go up. If they do get hurt in any way, they know how to look after themselves, to administer proper first aid or life-saving first aid. Communication systems that need improving to ensure that they work more effectively. Management, command and control, leadership, all those things that are sort of second nature to the military, very applicable to the Ranger world. So our charity supplies mainly volunteers to go and work within Ranger organisations to either mentor them to improve what they're doing, or to train Rangers from no skill sets, from nothing, and train them up to be Rangers. And so we've been operating in Cameroon with the Zoological Society of London. We've been working in South Africa quite extensively, Namibia, Tanzania. And you know, we've had all sorts of people of different service backgrounds. So yeah, veterans can get involved. But you know, one thing I have learned personally, and we are learning as a charity, is that the conservation, you cannot be gung-ho. We're not there to do the job for people in other countries or tell them what to do. We're trying to give them skill sets. So our guys don't actively patrol. They are mentors. They are trainers. And you have to understand the language. You know, it's a very sensitive world, like the humanitarian world, and you kind of have to leave that military ego, that system, the regimented system, the way you think. Draw the skills that you got from the military, but you have to sort of repackage them in an appropriate manner, a deliverable manner, for working in some very sensitive countries that quite often certainly don't want veterans, mercenary-looking veterans in their country. It's a very sensitive industry to be working in, but also rewarding for veterans, because you're using skill sets, and actually, you know, the work we do does help combat the illegal wildlife trade, and it does make Rangers safer and better operationally.
I'll tell you what brought it home to me. It was about 3 weeks ago. We watched something, I think it was on the iPlayer or something, the documentary that Aldo Kane did, you know, about the tigers.
Yeah.
Wow, I mean, I was shocked at that. I just didn't realise the kind of trade. Obviously, I've seen the sort of daft one that was on Netflix about the Tiger King over in America, which is still horrendous. But I didn't realise the trafficking was so bad, sort of in the Southeast Asia sort of area.
That's exploitation mainly. I mean, so there's two parts. There's exploitation for petting zoos, yeah. And then of course there's tiger wine, tiger bone, hides. I mean, it's bloody ridiculous. Yeah. Tigers actually are one of the conservation. There's one of the conservation success stories. Their numbers are steady. And they say they're increasing, but they're probably just counting them better. But that species has sort of we've halted the decline. Pangolins may have a reprieve, but every single species seems to be in decline, unless it's a pigeon or, you know, something that can live in harmony with humans, and especially wild spaces, wild forests, our oceans. We're pillaging it. 7 billion people rising to 9 is a massive conflict with the natural world because of the way we live. You know, I don't want to get preachy about it, but we do have some serious issues going on in the world right now. And, you know, it's hard sometimes to be optimistic when you think that number of people versus the space we require and the resources we require is not conducive to a good relationship with nature. It's concerning.
It's hard if you were to put on, like, do a paper exercise of all the different issues that you would like to be involved in. It must be quite hard to sort of, you know, put them in any sort of order or priority, because one shouldn't really be any more important than the other just because it's closer to home or further away or more glamorous to be at or easier to make a documentary on.
Without putting you out of work, is leave the bees in your house. They're not a pest. Bees have been a massive decline across the UK, especially the variety of species that have been declined. Yeah. So leave the bees, leave the wasps. Invasive species, the hornets, take those bad boys out. But I mean, of course, instead of children's playground, you don't want all. But it must be difficult. The more you start caring about nature, you start seeing out these issues.
Well, I try to be ethical. When I get a phone call for a job, clearly I've got to pay my mortgage. And I'm in business to make money. But I try to be ethical with what I'm dealing with, what comes over the phone. If I've got rats in my garden, can you help me? Well, if you back onto a stream or a woodland, you perhaps prone to having them. So maybe proof your garden rather than let's go in with loads of toxic chemicals. Same with if you've got bees. Well, are they up in your chimney? Are they coming in your house? Are they in your loft? Or are they just on the wall? Certainly on a lot of more modern builds now, they've got these little weep holes around the window frames to allow the cavity to breathe. And you're just getting mortar bees in. So I'm like, honestly, they can't even sting her. So can we just leave them? But then I'm kind of concerned that she'll get someone who perhaps doesn't care because she really is worried she'll get someone in anyway to do it. So I think, well, am I better going doing it and doing it ethically?
Can you move them? Can you move bees? Is that a ridiculous question?
No, it's not at all. Some we can. So certainly honeybees, if they outgrow where their hive is, they'll move from one place and they'll rest. So we can collect them and move them to somewhere out of public way or whatever. But quite often they'll be in a wall, a cavity or whatever. So there is a ways and means to do, go about getting them out, but it's not always a viable option. So it's a shame, really.
So you're on hold then to find out whether you're going to do the basking sharks, which
yeah, well, they say the trip's going ahead. I'll have to check. It's either the 1st or the 2nd of September through to the 6th, so the Wednesday till the Sunday.
Having been down to Plymouth doing the blue sharks the other day, and there is so much on offer across the UK. I think it's good. Staycationing is good, and I think that's going to be one of the positive habits or positive changes that comes for our country. And I think it's, talking about, we alluded to sort of disparity in people, across the country and the divide in the country financially. Actually, more people going out to different regions, different coastal areas is really good. And what we're really talking about is ecotourism here. We all, as divers, everyone wants to go and do Tiger Beach, everyone wants to go and do Palau, everyone wants to go to these exotic locations, Hans Bay in South Africa. We've got so much here. Scapa Flow, you've got the basking sharks. Off the south coast, you've got the blue sharks. Off Ireland, you've got the blue shark. I hope it stimulates more stay-at-home wildlife tourism. We get humpback whales. We've obviously got the basking sharks. We've got so much. I think there's great opportunity.
Well, I've tried. Similar to what you said earlier about the rivers, you're getting your rig on and getting in the rivers. We've done that. We started that just before lockdown and had this aim. I wanted to do 12 different rivers in 12 months in the UK. And we started one and it was beautiful. It was freezing cold, but it was beautiful, glass clear or gin clear. It was phenomenal. And then we've done a couple since which have been not as good, but it's just that movement. And then documenting just UK dive sites. So North Wales is most local to us, where it's worth going. So all the little beaches and inlets, we've been going there quite regularly every weekend and get them boxed off, which has been ace. But so are you down the southwest then? If you go in Plymouth, is that where you're based?
No, I'm based in London at the moment.
All right.
But I travel all over. But for my next trips, I should be going to Florida. I just have to work out how to get there.
Yeah.
To make a film about bull sharks, and then I've got a great white shark diving trip coming up. And from now on, and I've been training myself as an underwater cameraman for a while. I've filmed topside anyway. I've been training with my dad, but now is I call it the Andy Casagrande model. Everyone knows in the diving world there's Andy Casagrande and Andy Casagrande. I'm just investing in a Sony A7S III and Nauticam housing. So from now on, yes, there's the presenting, but I love the production and the filming, and that that's sort of my future now. Going forward is as a wildlife cameraman, underwater cameraman, producer, and when the opportunities come to do the sort of hosting, presenting.
See, I find that harder. I much prefer being behind the camera with no training, I'll admit, other than in stills photography. I find it much harder to be in front of the camera. Certainly, even if I'm in my garage doing a little how-to video on how to change an O-ring or whatever, I'm not the most comfortable in front of there. So maybe my future in TV's looking
practice. All of these things, and I say to anybody, the more you practice, the more, and you make these rubbishy Chad little videos, which I've been doing for years. So all my friends have taken the piss out of me for a long time, but you just got to do it. You've got to make mistakes. And you will get better. I'm getting better and better, and I'm still rubbish, but I'm better. I'm not as rubbish as I was 3 years ago, put it that way.
If somebody wanted to look at a career within the TV world as a diver, in whatever guise that might be, what sort of training would you say was specific? Is there anything you could sort of signpost someone in that direction?
Yeah, I think the basics. You've got to be at PADI Rescue, BZAC Sports plus HSE diver. Technical, so if you can, can afford to do rebreathers, because more and more the wildlife industry has realised actually rebreathers is the most natural way to be with wildlife. I think being proficient in the UK waters, and I've dived around the world, and I can tell you the hardest dive to do at night is in Plymouth Harbour, and in a spring tide. If you could dive in the UK, if you could dive in Scotland, you could dive anywhere in the world, and you build up your experience. And then if you want to film, build up your portfolio, and buy a good quality case for your iPhone 11. Get something like that. I mean, these things film well. So does a GoPro Hero 8, really smooth. That's what I was filming the Blue Sharks with. You've got to build up that portfolio, and you're going to have to do, unfortunately, a lot of sort of free support work, but just keep getting in touch with British production companies or anybody doing these expeditions. You just got to be part of it. You've got to be making content, or you've got to be just doing stuff related to the species or the types of water that you want to work in, or the area you want to work in, and doing what we're doing. Keep meeting people, reaching out, talking to people, and you just need that little break. It's a ladder, and you just to get on the first rung. You're not instantly going to be filming Blue Planet 3, but it's perseverance.
Yeah. So thick skin. And
the industry, like many, is cliquey. It's hard to get into and competitive, because we said at the beginning, it's niche. Diving is niche, and there's only a small number of jobs for what is. It's glamorous to go to these places, and it's a privilege to be with amazing marine life and making something as cool as a sort of wildlife documentary. So perseverance, and just trying to sort of be a team player and get on with people. There's all the human skills, but I can't. Bottom line is, if you watch any inspirational video of someone that's succeeded, they will say hard work, perseverance, try again. That advice will never change.
On that note, mate, we'll wrap it up. Well, I really appreciate your time, James. I say exactly the same phrase to everyone at the end of these, but I do, because obviously it's took a bit to get us together on it, and certainly when it's 30 odd degrees outside, I'm sure you'd much sooner be sat in your garden than sat on here talking to me.
No, and thanks for reaching out to me, and I hope we do end up diving together and doing some projects together. But
that'd be cool.
Again, wow, what an amazing experience to realise that we were maybe in the same convoy in Afghanistan, certainly the same base at the same time. I handed over to you guys, and that's been one of the defining points of my life. So
mine too. It's such a strange and small world, but I really appreciate you coming on, mate. Thanks a lot. See you.
Cheers, Danny. Thanks.
So that brings us to an end of episode 24 with my friend James Glancy. Links to all the things we discussed are in the podcast notes. My guest on episode 25 is Kieran Hatton, my soon-to-be instructor on the JJ closed-circuit rebreather. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew podcast with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find more scuba-related content on my YouTube channel. The link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. And if there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via our Facebook page. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.